Hello, Lake Avenue staff family. Today I'm going to talk about the Enneagram. In case you didn't know, we've been exploring the Enneagram with our young adult community. We did a young adult Enneagram workshop for 3 weeks, which was really fun and I think produced a lot of fruit in that community, both for self-reflection and sanctification individually, but also for building a community that's empathetic and curious about the other. So that's my hope for us as a church community too, that we would experience the Enneagram as a tool to help us be more self-reflective and also be more empathetic. So what is the Enneagram? Enneagram literally means 9 types, Enneagram, 9 types or personality typologies that describe not who you are in a determinist way, but how you are. So it's nature plus nurture, and the way you have learned to operate in the world. So there are 9 types, and those 9 types are divided into 3 triads, and they're associated with a specific way of being in the world. And those triads are called the gut triad or body triad, the head triad, and the heart triad. And all of us use our brains, our hearts, and our gut instincts, but we tend towards leaning on one more than the others, and that's how this gets grouped. So let's start with the body or the gut triad. The gut triad includes numbers 8, 9, and 1, and these folks are typically very action-oriented. They trust their gut instinct over their thinking or their feeling about any decision or any way of operating in the world. So in the gut triad, we've got our 8, which is the challenger. The challenger is a large personality, often very intense. They're justice-oriented, and typically they had an experience early on in their childhood or in their development where they felt like their being vulnerable cost them something. So maybe they felt like they had a situation in their family where they had to become an adult or had to grow up faster, and their innocence was lost in a sense. So the 8s work in their world. They've learned to operate in the world to not be vulnerable, to not be weak. And so they use a great deal of their energy to assert that in the world. So they're often work really hard to build their strength, whether that's their physical strength, their emotional strength, their physical or their mental strength. They tend to be a dominant personality type. They take charge, and so often they're put into positions of leadership. They're often upfront people. They can be a force to be reckoned with, and they will fight for the underdog and defend the powerless, and it's a beautiful part of their imaging of God. And then we have the 9. The 9 are called the peacemakers, and they are often the fun, empathetic, kind, generous, social folks that are really like their superpower is they can read the dynamics of a group. They can intuitively know what's happening in a situation or in a room. They do not like conflict. And so their energy and their effort is utilized to resolve conflict, to bring people together. They often had, typically sometime early, they felt like their feelings or their emotions were put aside for the sake of someone else's feelings or emotions. And again, this is their perception of that. It may, 2 people from the same family might not have the same perception, but they felt like their feelings were less valid than other people's feelings. So now they've taken that and turned it into how they operate in the world is they consider other people's feelings. And they can often, what we use in Enneagram circles, we talk about falling asleep. So they've fallen asleep to their own feelings, their own emotions. Sometimes they can be indecisive. They don't necessarily know what they want. It's harder for them to get in touch with their emotions because they've been working to suppress those feelings for so long. The next type is the 1, or the reformer, sometimes called the perfectionist. I think the reformer is a little nicer, but they have a deep longing to reform systems and structures in the world. they have a clear sense of right and wrong and black and white. And early on, they were had maybe experiences, or they perceived that the way to operate in the world was to be good. And so they have internalized that, and they have worked to be good. They put a whole lot of effort into self-improvement. They have ridiculously high standards for themselves typically, and almost everyone I know struggles with a really intense inner critic, that nothing is ever quite good enough. Sometimes it's all focused on the self. Other times ones can inflict that self-critic or that criticism on the people closest to them. So they may be very critical, but it's out of a desire for them to be good, to achieve this goodness, this right and wrong system. They really do see imperfections everywhere they go. They see it in themselves, they see it in others. So a healthy one represses that need to speak about those imperfections and lets people be who people are, and then also learns to accept themselves in their flaws. So that's the gut type. Then we go on to the heart type. The heart type are the feelers among us. They are often called the image triad as well, because their image or their identity is so often determined by the world around them, and how they perceive the world receives them. So the 2 is the first type, and we call them the helper. They are generally really gifted at service. They are self-sacrificing, kind, and generous. They learned early on that the way to be loved and to be appreciated was to serve. And so they've taken on this idea that I can be loved if I serve others. So much of their identity is wrapped up in whether they are good at serving. And so the 2, they really need to hear thank you. They really need acknowledgement that you've served them, that's like water to a thirsty soul. And they very much repress their own needs for the sake of other people's needs. They read people's emotions really well. In a healthy 2, that's really good. In an unhealthy 2, that can actually lead to manipulation or codependency. They're servant-hearted, kind. They're the kindest of all of the types, and they're genuine and caring. But they do have a hard time saying no. They take on often too much because they want that acceptance, they want that love, and so they think that they can get it by serving others. Similar, but totally different, we have the 3, which are the achiever, or sometimes we call them the performer. The achievers are machines of efficiency and goals. They get stuff done. They are incredibly capable. They achieve a lot. They're goal-oriented, driven. They're action-oriented. They could take over the world, really. They're trying, with these efforts of success, they're trying to be valuable. They're trying their identity. They believe that what they achieve is how they can be loved. So early on, they had an experience or a perception of an experience where it didn't matter who they were, but what they did. And so they've internalized that and have turned that into an incredible ability to get stuff done. They can value succeeding over anything else. So they can be manipulative or lose touch with truth. They can bend truth, or spin is another nicer way of saying it. They can spin data, spin reporting so that it comes out that they were successful after all. Failure is a very, very hard thing for a 3 to experience. So that's the 3. And then we have the 4, the individualist. These are the passionate, poetic, often creative types that wear their emotions on their sleeves. These are folks who are very in touch with how they feel. If you ask them, how do you feel about blank? They will know. They will have an answer for you. They're the therapist's favorite client. They really can express what they're feeling. And early on, they had this gnawing sense of feeling that there was something missing, or they didn't have what someone else had. And so their desire has been to search for that thing that's been missing. They often feel like they don't belong in a crowd, and so they will take on this persona of an individual. They don't want people to put them in a box. They don't want to be characterized. If you're having a hard time feeling like you fit into any of these types, maybe you're a 4, because we don't like to be typed. That's part of the 4 scenario. They love vulnerability and are drawn to people who they perceive as being vulnerable and real and raw. They often compare themselves with others and can feel like they come up lacking. So there's this internal critic for them that says that they're not enough, or they don't belong, or they don't fit in. So those are the heart types. The last triad is the head type, and these folks are marked with the way they process information, the way they make decisions is generally lends itself to their thinking. So the first one is the 5, the investigator or observer. They tend to be outside looking in. So they're comfortable engaging with their brain, with their mind and their thoughts before actually engaging physically or relationally. They're early on, they likely perceived that there was an incident or incidences where they felt like their energy, their emotional energy was taken from them and it was never replenished. And so they're constantly working to conserve that energy. So it's not that they don't have emotions, it's not that they don't feel things, but they're conserving it because they know that that's limited or feels like that could be taken away from them. They tend to be introverted, even hermits. They love the world of books. They love the world of knowledge, and they love being perceived as an expert or a scholar. They love being asked to give their opinion on something that they've researched. And their fear really is that they wouldn't have the knowledge that is desired, or that would give them the kind of identity or acceptance that they long for. 4 or 5s are very private people. Their work life and their home life and their whatever life is all separated, and they're perfectly content to have a small circle of friends that they spend time with or are real with. Then we have the 6, which is the loyalist. The loyalist is driven constantly. There's a narrative in their head about what could go wrong. And so their drive and their core need is to feel prepared, to feel like they've gone through all the worst case scenarios. And usually they start in the negative, the worst case scenarios, and have thought through them all and planned through them all. They're called the loyalist because if a person or even an organization or an institution has made it through that long list of barriers or obstacles that they've perceived, then that person will be fiercely loyal to that relationship or that organization because they've won their trust. So once trust is won, they are loyal to the end. The 6 does not want to be caught off guard. They want to be safe and secure. And so in their fear, when they confront fear, there's 2 ways that they can respond. They can either respond to it by running from fear, or they can hit fear head on with bravery to prove that they're bigger than or greater than that fear. 6 actually, they say, is the #1 American type. That's the most prevalent among the American population are the 6s. And then lastly, we've got the enthusiast. And the enthusiasts at their core are looking to avoid pain. They love new challenges, new adventures. They love thinking, future orientation. They love their pitfall can be gluttony because they can consume. And it's not just about the food that they're eating, but the experience. They love experiences. They're typically super energetic, multi-talented. They've got tons of adventurous spirit. They're persuasive. They're charming. They love to plan. They love to dream. They live in their head in the possibilities. They're not so grounded in the present. And so a healthy 7 who can stay in the midst of a painful situation and not flee and not escape, whether that's in their head or physically, that is a mark of a healthy 7, that they're always on the go. They love change. They love busy schedules. They love taking on a lot of things. That's just the way they do. But they, at the core, they have this anxiety. And so all that they do is a way to escape that anxiety. And sometimes they aren't in touch with that anxiety. And so it will hit them in the face when they least expect it. All right, so those are the 9 types. And if you want to dig into those more, there's a bunch more layers there. This is just skimming the surface. I'll provide some resources for you so you can dig in. So one of the reasons why I love the Enneagram is that at its core, one of the questions we ask is, what is the core motivation? What is it that drives their decision making, and what is it that drives their actions? And sometimes, a lot of times, I can be in a situation where I can think, how is it possible that they would even think that? Or that person would even do that? It seems so it's just unbelievable to me. And if I slow down for a minute and realize that not everyone is like me, not everyone has the same motivations or the same fears or even desires, then I might be able to see that somebody else who's different than me might have a different motivation. So I thought it'd be helpful in our last couple of minutes here to do a little bit just describing what are the coping strategies, and then also kind of the image of Christ in each of these types. So just remember that what motivates us more than love is often fear, right? So if we can understand what our core fear is, and each type is different, then that might help us understand or have empathy towards people's actions. So let me get here. So the core basic fears of each of the subtypes. The type 1 is the fear of not being good. So at any cost, at every cost, they will seek to be good, to do the right thing, and they want other people to do the same. The 2 has a deep fear of being unlovable or unworthy, unwanted. And so their service to others is motivated by this desire to be loved. The 3 is their deep fear of being without worth or value. And so they work hard in order that they might achieve the worth that they long for. And the 4, they feel like there's something missing. Their fear is that they are not significant, that they have no personal significance in and of themselves. And so they work hard to try to stand out and to be different because they want to have this weighty significance about them. The 5 is this fear of being uninformed, that they don't have all the answers or being incapable. And so they work so hard in their head to come up with the answers, to do the research, to do the learning work so that they will not be seen as being uninformed. The 6, their deep fear is that they won't be secure or safe. And so they're working through those worst case scenarios in their head in order to safeguard themselves against the potential pitfalls of not being safe. The 7, they don't want to be trapped in pain. Another way of saying is their fear is that no one's going to take care of them. So they're on their own to take care of themselves. And so the way they do that is to run away from the pain that could trap them. And then the 8 is the fear of being controlled by others. And so their response is to control. They assert their authority. They assert their strength. And then lastly, the 9 is their fear is to be separated or to be in conflict. And so they don't want conflict. So their whole way of being is to try to resolve conflict. So that means they don't share their opinion. They don't share their opinion because they don't want conflict. Now, that being said, last thing I want to talk about is that each of us, because we belong to Jesus, also image God in our lives. And we are working to bring about the hope of the kingdom of God, the hope of the reconciliation of the world. We work towards bringing the world that's broken back together again. And so each of us do that in a different way. So for the ones, they think that if they can get themselves together, if they can be good, they can triumph over darkness. They can triumph over the bad by controlling themselves to be good. The twos serve and they work towards expressing this service towards others as an image of God. The threes, they work towards self-development, and they want to be successful and to be a better person, to be more successful in the world. And then fours, I love the fours because they sit in the emotion. They sit in the mourning, in the grief, in the burdens. They are the lamenters among us. So whereas all these other types are working so hard to change bad into good, the fours offer this beautiful picture of sitting in the pain. So sometimes they don't want to move on. Emotionally, they're still there. They want to hold us in that space and hold us accountable as a community to sitting in that pain so that we can experience it. The fives, they just think they can solve the problems in their head. They think if I come up with the right formula, the right solution, then we can move forward together. Sixes, they forecast all the potential dangers and work towards safeguarding against those things. And the seven, they seek pleasure. They image God in the joy of the Lord, but sometimes they forget to engage the pain. And the eights, they really fight for justice. They use their anger, redeemed anger, hopefully is righteous anger, for the work of God's kingdom. And the nines make it better through routine, through calm. They bring a calming presence about them. So this is a lot. I realize that. A lot to take in. But what I'd love for us to do is just personally examine what our core motivations are. Maybe our core fear that motivates us to our actions. And then maybe seek to learn from somebody else about their core fear and how that relates to the way they act. And hopefully that creates empathy and communication and a community of learning and curiosity. So that's my hope for us. I know this is just the beginning of the journey, but I hope that was helpful.